Hey, this is Sam Williams from Down by Law, Denial Fiend, Black Valley Moon. I will see you at the Tampa Morgue.
What's up? This is Tony, and you're listening to the Tampa Morgue Season 2, Episode number 86. And as always, I'm joined by my co host from his Tampa Bay studio, Mr. Ed Webb. How is all in the Bay, Webb?
Mr. Anderson, nothing to report. Sadly, I have nothing to report.
No bullets in your car, no tires rolling off. It's a good week at the Webb household.
Yeah, it's a little slow over here.
Yeah, so it's okay though. Sometimes you need those kind of weeks, because we, of course, we've been busy here on the podcast. We've got a lot of stuff going on as always. Tonight we opened up the show with Denial Fiend. They Arise off of it came out on Ibex Moon Records, October 16th, 2007. And we're going to have Sam Williams from Denial Fiend, Down by Law, and Black Valley Moon joining us tonight. We know Sam, he's a Tampa guy. So tonight's kind of, we've been all over the place. We've done shows, Finland, we've done Spain recently. We've done, we got Belgium coming up, which we'll talk about. We've been all over the place, but we're going to be in Tampa Center today, right? With Sam coming on. He'll be on in about probably like 15 minutes. But Denial Fiend, when they first started out, me and Ed actually believe we saw the first show ever they played at the Crowbar. It would be 2007. We'll find that out tonight too. Started out with Cam Lee on vocals, Sam Williams on guitar. Like I said, Sam's going to be joining us. Curtis Beeson from obviously Nasty Savage, and Sin God. Curtis passed away in 2024. Terry Butler, of course, who Ed's played in bands with. What Hideous? Terry's in Inhuman Condition, Massacre, yeah, Obituary. How could you forget that? Obituary is rolling right now.
Rolling hard.
Yeah, I mean, every year they get more successful. It's kind of crazy to watch.
35 years of cause of death. Just
that's
think
insane.
about that for a second.
Yeah, which is actually tonight, right? They're not playing tonight, but I know we were talking earlier before the show that, obviously when people hear this, it'll probably be already started maybe. But Nails is playing, but Nails is going to be touring with Obituary on the cause of death. 35 years.
I think it starts tomorrow or Friday, one of the two. Their tour, they're called, 35 years of cause of death.
Think about that, dude. 35 years since that album came out.
I have.
Yeah. I mean, it's all these albums that we talk about. Like you start getting, I remember when it used to be 20 years and I'd be like, oh, 20 years. That seems like a lot. Now we're rolling to like 35. I mean, it's
because let's think, let me do the math real quick. 18. That was 18.
Wow. That wasn't yesterday,
No, not if it was 35 years ago.
Yeah. 35 years, but still a great album. I mean, but yeah, we'll have Sam on tonight. And we have John Berry next week from Slaughter Messiah, Ancient Rites, and Burial Ground. He's the drummer for Slaughter Messiah, so we'll be talking to him. He'll be on next week's episode. And then we have, this is like 1st of May, I believe we're going to have Ronnie Palmer on from A Liveling Creation, Perdition Temple, Brutality.
Never heard of that guy.
Another guy you've played with, yes, and Destined to Ruin. Brutality, Blood Messiah, Examon, which I may have already said. He'll be joining us on the 1st. And then I just talked to, we're going to have from Finland, a band that I really dig, Sacrilegious Impalement, will be coming on next month. We'll be updating details on that once we get everything set up with those guys. So, we have, like I said,
busy.
Yeah. And last week we had Yarno, aka Sulfur from Urn and Graves on. We're promoting the Demon Steel record, talked about their history. That was episode 85. So that was last week.
Well, we are 14 closer to 100 than we were a month ago.
I mean, I haven't went back. Like I've heard some of the older episodes once in a while when I they just pop up on my thing, and I haven't really listened to the first episode we ever did, but it's probably a total shit show. But we've come, like I said, we've come a long way because we've learned how to use the technology better. I mean, people who don't know, when we first started this show, we were holding cell phones up to the microphone and playing songs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Which is, to think about, because I tried to pinpoint when I started doing the editing, like when I started to realize that I could fix the shows. And
because at first we're just throwing the shit up there, right?
Yeah, because we didn't have, I think at first you tried to add songs in Riverside because there was a way to add them.
Yeah.
But then it wasn't working right. We weren't coming in and out because it was just clanky, And of course that was they've upgraded it so much because you told me that the stuff they have now is just phenomenal compared to when we So I look at, now the editing, and it's not like we're, trying to take shit out that wasn't there or nothing like that. You know what I mean? It's more of adding the songs so the guests don't have to hear them. You know, stuff that like that, because I couldn't imagine having to sit in the studio and like if I'm doing an interview and listen to my own songs for, because man, think about it, if we play 4 or 5 songs, that could be an extra 20, 30 minutes, you
Yeah.
know? And
I don't
that
even
to
think
me
we were
is,
playing songs. I don't even at first. I don't even know what the first episode, because we were playing parts of songs. Because I remember we had Vincent Crowley on. We played part of the song. We had I don't know. I think we played full songs in the early days when we first
yeah,
started doing this.
I don't remember. That might
Yeah.
be might be worth going back and listening just to punch myself in the face, you know?
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I tell Ed I think about deleting some of the first couple episodes just because it was total like
No,
learn
they
as you go. But we're keeping them
can't
up.
delete it, man.
Yeah,
That's just who we are and what we are. And I mean, look at Joe Rogan. I went and listened to one of his first shows, and it is nothing compared to what it is now. Now, early days he was doing it in California, then he built his studio, and of course now he has Jamie, and that guy runs the whole ship. And I mean, his sound is great, but you know, they also do it in person on
yeah.
video, and they'll stop right in the middle, like, you know, where it's like, guess would be like, dude, I got to piss. And he's like, all right, we'll come right back. And then they flow right back because it's professional, but it's real. You know, that's
Those
the one
early
thing.
shows, like you remember Stern, dude. Like back,
Oh
it was like a
God.
college radio show back in the day. Like there was millions of things going on in the
Even
background.
local, if you want to talk local for Bubba the Love Sponge, you know,
Yeah,
yo, 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 you know, I mean, he would do sound effects and the boinkers. And remember the fake, he had the greatest fake hang up, like, you know, go talk to your mother, you know, the old, you know, handheld phone where you
was
would
that when he was
actually
on like Power Pig or whatever? He
Power
was.
Pig. And then the
Yeah,
early days of 98 Rock, you know, you would call
yeah,
kids you dead fetus, and, you know, hang up the phone, and it would sound like an abrupt phone hanging up, then with the dial tone.
yeah. It's
Ooh, the old school dial tone. Yeah, so everybody comes from somewhere, and that's where we did. We started
yeah,
early, and I mean, look at the mics we got. We actually sound fucking good now.
yeah. At
We
first,
sounded
it was
okay before.
ridiculous.
I mean, we had expensive recording mics for vocals, but I told you, when you get off access with it, it's meant to be straight on, and if you're talking sideways, your volume drops, and it creates a very weird wavelength in the you know, in the DAW you're working with. And these mics, man, when I look at it, it just sounds solid. So yeah,
Yeah, it's changed a lot, and since we started, you know,
we're still jobbers.
yeah, yeah, we're
Let's
still
just
figuring it out. I
like,
will tell you that we are like. There's been a lot of behind the scenes shit that no one has to deal with that we've had to deal with, where we've lost like segments or just
oh.
you know just some
Well, the
so-
Vincent Crowley, we recorded a half hour, and your internet, your whole neighborhood went out.
whole neighborhood
Remember?
lost power.
And
Boom.
now, knowing what we know now, I could have kept going till you came back on, and we could have just fused it
Yeah.
in. But we wound up having to recut the whole thing. And I
Yeah, I really had
remember,
no idea when we started. I mean,
no,
it was just like throwing stuff up in the air and see what would happen. But, you know, and I know people go back and listen to the old episodes, which I do find crazy. I see it all the time in the downloads, like, and I'm like, you know, some of the stuff I even forget we did, and then I see it. So again, we always appreciate everybody who checks us out. And yeah, man, we're gonna, like I said, we got next week. We'll be back every week. We've been doing shows every week. Not saying we'll always do it every week, but it's been pretty.
consistent.
It's been pretty consistent. So you know, like I said, Sam Williams will be joining us tonight from Denial Fiend. We'll play some Denial Fiend tonight, and at the end of the show, we're actually going to play his band Black Valley Moon. I will tell you all, it's totally different to what we play on this show. We've never played surf rock song, but we're going to
What,
play it at the end of the show.
what, Dick Dale and the Surfers, was that his
Yeah,
name?
yeah,
Yeah, like that.
it's totally different to what we ever have played on this show. Because you know, we're pretty much, you know, we
Or metal centric,
metal. Yeah, we're a metal
punk,
show.
metal,
Yeah,
hardcore.
so it's
But
totally different. But we're going to play
you
it.
know what? We've always said, like, I'll tell you straight up, and we've heard our guests say it. If I got a call from Joe Elliott that he wanted to come on the show, we're fucking talking to Joe Elliott, because
Yeah,
I'm a Def Leppard fan. Stephen Pearcy, even though he's a freaking nutball, you know, any of those guys,
yeah,
Skid Row, anybody, any of those old '80s bands, I would, even hell. I mean, we Foreigners coming here. If one of the dudes from Foreigner wanted to pop on and talk about it, we're music history. You know,
Yeah.
we're doing with music. So really we're more metal centric, but you can't pigeonhole yourself into just one thing otherwise.
No, definitely. But we are definitely more extreme than what we're going to hear. So, I mean, tonight, like I
Oh
said, we're
yeah.
going to play a lot of Denial Fiend, which is totally up our, like, what the show is, kind of built around. But you're going to probably hear some bands mentioned tonight that you've never heard on the show before. Because like I said, with Sam, he has his history is, he's been in the punk world doing the Down by Laws and stuff. And when I was growing up, yeah, of course I grew up on metal and rock and all that stuff, but of course I grew up on the Descendants records, the Milo Goes to College in '82 and all those old Descendants. I thought Ackerman was great. Big Descendants fan. Bad,
Circle Jerks, all those
Circle
guys.
Jerks, Bad Brains. I mean, I still think Eye Against Eye is one of my
It's
favorite records.
probably one of the most underrated records probably
Yeah, love it.
ever. Honestly, because
Yeah.
if you talk to any metalhead, like, and when I say metalhead, I'm talking about like the early guys, Hetfield, all those guys. If you talk to them, the first thing they would say is Bad Brains, like literally, or DRI or Misfits. You know what I mean? All those bands that were underrated and propelled them to write the music they wrote. And look at us. My neighbor across the street, I bought a bass and he bought a bass, and he was a skateboarder. I was a freestyle biker. So the bikers were more metal and they were skateboarders. So I remember going, he had a half pipe in his backyard, and I'd be hearing all this, like, I mean, he's the one who introduced me, believe it or not, because in the early days, Sacred Reich was more of a skateboard band because of the whole anti-government kind of thing, you know what I mean? And I went over there and I'm listening to all this stuff and thinking, holy cow, and then he's hearing my stuff, so we're trading back and forth, and that's how I learned about a lot of the band, the Descendants that we were talking about, DRI, all that stuff, because that was the skateboard world, Suicidal Tendencies.
Well,
I
I
mean,
tell you what was huge, Ed, and you probably remember this. There was a thing with a lot of, I want to say it was, man, it's been so long now, the epitaph bands and stuff, or the surf videos. So they started getting all their songs put on the skate and surf videos, and I think that was huge for those bands. If I remember, I was a big Dwarves fan. Like, I mean, Ed knows that's probably the Descendants was one of my favorites, but the Dwarves, like Blood Guts Pussy from 1990, or Free Cocaine. I love the old Dwarves records. I still like the Dwarves, but it's changed a lot. I think Blag is an amazing vocalist. Seen the Dwarves a shitload of times. Actually, on the first Doomslow record, which was a band that me and Ed have been involved with, we had Vag Moore on that record, involved with that, from the Dwarves, and that was, to me, that was like one of those checklist
highlights.
things. Like, yeah, It was really cool that he did it, because he's an author also. But yeah, so I mean, we'll talk to Sam. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of Tampa metal talk, but there's also going to be I mean, Sam's seen some stuff, man. He's been on tour for years with Down by Law, and in the punk world, he's played with some of the biggest bands. So he'll be on in about probably like 10 minutes or so. And Ed, we have a few things, like always, before we get him on. And again, we'll show up at the end of the show, me and Ed, for like probably a couple minutes and talk, because we'll be doing another episode before you know it. So, we're going to try to keep this under, I'm going to say under 3 hours, because I jinx us whenever I say a certain time. But
bastard, you just
yeah,
fucked it.
I always fuck us with this, it's unbelievable. But so I mentioned the guests. So I'm going to mention, so I guess we'll start with shows, Ed, because I only have like 2 shows to mention, to be honest with you. Because next week we're going to be back on. So I've been kind of trying to, like, save some stuff for next week, because there's always so much shit coming in. I have releases that people send too, and there's a bunch of releases coming out. So I kind of split those up too. So the only 2 shows I have, I'll go, kind of go in order. And plus there may be other shows besides this. I know, like we were said, Nails is playing tonight. Where's that at? Is that
Orpheum.
at the Orpheum? The Orpheum in Tampa. But April 25th, Cardiac Arrest from Chicago, Vacuous Steps from Tampa, Grave Filth from Gainesville, Extinguished from Pompano Beach, Othalin from Tampa. That's going to be at the Brass Mug. That's 1450 Skipper Road, Tampa, Florida. If you live in Tampa, you pretty much know where that's at, I would hope. Doors at 7, $20 that show. And the other one I have is in June, actually. I'll just mention it again. I mentioned it last episode, I believe. Saturday, June 14th. It's an exclusive Florida show. Putrid Pile from Wisconsin, Mystery Meat from Texas, Antiseptic from Broward County, Los Reyes Bong Death from Miami, Law of Casualty from Tampa, and that is also at the Brass Mug, $20, all ages, 7 p.m. And Ed, you haven't. There's no shows, right? That you have.
I have actually three,
There you go. Cool.
four. Holy cow!
Yeah.
200 Stab Wounds is playing the Orpheum on the 18th, and it looks like they're on with Whitechapel, which I had somebody reach out and try to get tickets. Apparently, they sold out.
You know, it's
And
funny is I have not heard of. I've heard of both of those bands because I know they're popular. Actually, both of them. I've never heard either of those bands, which is crazy.
really,
Yeah,
no,
I've never even heard
Whitechapel's
2000 Stab Wounds,
Whitechapel
right?
job for a cowboy. They're kind of that same vein of, I don't want to call them metalcore because they're a little heavier, but just fucking heavy. They're pretty fucking heavy.
Yeah, I've never heard either of
Then,
them.
which I didn't realize that they're playing the Orpheum, and of course, the same night the Genitortures are playing the Brass Mug. So that's gonna hurt.
Wow.
And then the next day, the 19th, which I think is Sunday, I think, the Meshuggah Cannibal Carcass tour is rolling through. They're playing
Oh,
the
that'll
Youngling
be.
Center, which used to be the USF Sundome. 7 o'clock. I am split right now. You know, I talked to Lee. Lee said he was going. The problem is I looked online because they've already been doing the tour, and I saw the set list, and Carcass is only playing 30 minutes. And I'm like, I mean, I just saw Cannibal play with Amon Amarth, 6 months ago?
Yeah, I was like about to say like
So,
probably half a year
and
ago, if
Meshuggah,
that.
I like the original Meshuggah, like the first three records, the four. I don't like when they dropped down to 8 strings and started just playing a bunch of jun 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 jun. You know, it just doesn't move me. I mean, I need a little more disco in my life, and that's not cutting it. So I'm not sure because tickets are ridiculous. Mark Van Erp said the tickets up in New York, they're playing. I guess Madison Square Garden has a smaller area that they do shows, which I did not know about.
Yeah, neither did I.
But he said that it's a studio, but it's like huge. It's just not the arena. And apparently the tickets were like $150. And I'm just
Jesus
like,
Christ.
it's New York. I mean, what do you expect? It's New York.
Yeah.
But I'm just,
I want to
so
say I could be wrong, but I think when I saw the Clash of the Titans and like that was in '93, I want to say it might have been $30, which probably back then seemed like a shitload of money.
I saw them at the Lakeland Civic Center, and I think I still have the ticket stub. Like I have them in a box. And I want to say you're right. I think it was like that, and the Injustice for All I think was like $25.
That's good. And that's when you used to have to go stand in line or go to a tape store or CD store to buy the tickets, right?
Yeah, you used to have to go to like one of the record stores would be a Ticketmaster outlet. So
Yep.
you would go to I think it was Trax, or one of those was a Ticketmaster.
Radio Shack in Jersey, I believe, was selling tickets if I remember
Radio
correctly.
Shack. Holy shit!
Yeah.
There's a name you don't hear anymore.
Yeah, I think
the place that rips you off. But you know the crazy part about Radio Shack is when you needed that certain little tiny fuse, you'd walk in and you're like, "Yep, we got it, $22."
Yeah, when I used to do interviews for the zine and we would go to we'd go on the tour buses to interview the guys, I had to buy those little tapes, the little mini tapes. And the Radio Shack always had them, and there was one across the street from my house. So, it was very easy just to go.
Imagine if you had what you have today where you could just do it on your iPhone digitally and not have to and how good it would sound. Because those tapes, when you played them back, like I found a whole bucket full of cassette tapes in my shed. And one of them was, I got to play it for you one day, the Uneat stuff that we talked about that became Eulogy and other songs down the line. And I'm like, man, I need a tape player because I want to see, because I found a bunch of old school demos like Burial. Remember the band Burial from Tampa? Just tapes that were, I'm like, oh my God, these got to be worth something. But I want to make sure they play because the worst, you remember like when you see the old picture of the cassette tape and a pencil. And say, do you know what these two do to how these, you don't know until you know, you don't know the struggles, bro.
I think the worst thing, well, remember, I was doing it for a zine, so I was actually there was no, I wasn't playing tapes. I was having to take the interviews and write them down on it, basically type them up to send to the magazine. So it was kind of,
Yeah, you were transcribing them. Yeah,
yeah, it was a pain in
it's
the
a pain
ass,
in the
man.
ass.
It was a pain in the
Jinx.
ass. So yeah, it definitely was. So yeah, we got, so those, do you have any more, are there any more shows that you have?
I think
or is that it?
that's all I had. I forgot completely about the Meshuggah show because it was it's a bigger show, so you don't see them in the Orpheum / Brass Mug
Yeah.
realm. So yeah, that's what I had.
And I did see, because I only saw a little bit of news this morning. I kind of checked it out before I came on. I did see, we were talking about Judas Priest, Alice Cooper, and Corrosion of Conformity are doing a summer fall 2025 tour, which is a killer lineup. 22 cities. Starts in Mississippi on September 16th. I know they're playing like Georgia, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Tennessee, North Carolina, Arizona, Texas, Virginia, I believe Colorado, New Mexico too. I know it wraps up in Texas on October 26th, but I just saw that get announced this morning.
Probably no Tampa show.
I know Tampa show. I looked, I didn't see any Tampa show. Cryptopsy, 30 years still. They've been going on, and they were going to put out a new record on June 20th. I saw on Seasons of Mist. You see here, Insatiable Violence, it's called. It's their 9th studio record.
Dude, I remember seeing Cryptopsy where they would bring Lord Worm in for the show in a casket and put the casket on stage, and he would climb out, crush the set, because Lord Worm was definitely different. If you like that type of Cryptopsy, they've changed along the way a little bit.
I love None So Vile. I think that's my
None
favorite.
So Vile. That was,
I
remember they played a huge show in Canada, and they brought him in a casket. And I think it was it was his last show.
Oh yeah, because he left he did two different stints in that band. He
did. So the original time, I think what they did was, actually no, what it was is he played the show. Then somebody came up and did something to him. They put him in a casket. They took him out. They brought the another casket in, and the new singer came out and finished the set.
I think he left 97, I think it was, something like that.
Yeah, he had a different type of voice, but that was like early Dying Fetus days too, where when they had the guys that were all Misery Index now that were in Dying Fetus. So yeah, it's that was a long time ago, but I'm glad they're still doing shit. Because Flow, I saw them at Milwaukee Metal Fest, and they were with Lord Worm, and they were on fire, man. So yeah, definitely killer band.
Yeah, we mentioned what we were talking about. We saw, I don't know if you have any of the dates, or Left to Die's announced another tour yesterday, right? They're going to Europe.
I don't have the dates, but it's Europe.
Europe. So you can find that on there. I just saw that yesterday. And then we were talking about, well, actually, we could bring it up before I announce the releases if you want. The Gruesome, which we were talking about before we signed on tonight too. And before we do that, I will mention, of course, we have some musicians that passed away sent to me. So I'll start with, let me see here, Stephen Price from the USA, 65 years old, vocalist, guitar player for Phantom Lord out of New York. He was also in Thor, which, John Michael Thor. He passed away. I don't know. It doesn't I don't see how he passed away, but he did pass away. George Chisani, and again, some of these names, I do apologize if I'm not saying them correct. From Argentina, was a guitar player, 61, from a band called Bloke. And let me see here, he died from cancer. And a sad Kosti, I hope I'm not saying it wrong, from Ukraine, a 30-year-old drummer, played with Goat Flesh, Grave Circles, and Unfrozen. He was unfortunately killed in the war there. Well, they were, obviously everybody knows they were invaded. So sad, 30 years old, man. But that's, Ed knows that's a very, very touchy thing with me, and I think about Ukraine often. So that's, total. It's a sad news right there. But 30 years old, way too young to be a war victim. Katla, I went up again. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. 48 years old, from Poland. She died of cancer. She was in Goblin Market, in Liquid Fever. She was a vocalist. And Les Binks, and 73. Judas Priest. I mean, Stained Class was it 78, Hellbent for Leather, Unleashed in the East. I remember shit. What was it, like 85 when those two kids? It was like a 18 and a 20-year-old were getting drinking and stuff like that, and then took out a shotgun. One died. They both died, but I think one died immediately, and the other one died, I think, maybe a couple years after, but was totally fucked up from the situation. And they sued Priest for like, and CBS Records for like over $6 million. You think about that. That was a different time period, because we were talking, before, look at the Ozzy Osbourne was 84, the kid who killed himself listening to Suicide Solution,
Yep. I was
in
just about to say
California.
that.
Yeah. So I think that was 85, took Ozzy to court. They couldn't prove, obviously, that it was from the song, but that was back then it was a big thing, the whole satanic panic and all that, but yeah, so we appreciate whoever, we have someone who sends us the musicians who passed away. So we appreciate that. And, Ed, so I'll go through releases and then we'll get Sam on. And if you have any information on the gruesome, we can announce that. If you have any releases too, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You can go ahead.
Oh, great. Here we go. This should be a drum roll, right? I'll start here. So I'm trying to do them in order as much as I can. Let me see here. Imperatus from Vietnam, a black metal band. The title of the record is going to be The Dusk of Hopeless Dreams, self-released. Band formed in 2023. The band's second full-length to follow up to 2024's At Mercy of the Wind. Members of Frostbite, Leucotomy, Vong, and Frostfor. And that comes out April 15th, self-released. And since we're talking about Vietnam, I did talk to Nagdar. We had a Blood Serpent on from Vietnam probably about a year ago now, at least. They're finishing a split with Devil's Mass out of Texas. And I think they're putting out the original album, B-Style Extermination, on Old Cemetery Records. So anybody who hasn't heard that episode, we had them on. They're from Vietnam, called Blood Serpent. Band I really dug. The debut album's killer. So yeah, they're working on a split, which I think will be the first thing they're releasing since the B-Style Extermination. So since we were talking about Vietnam, I just talked to Nagdar the other day. I thought I'd mention that. Ungraven from the UK, doom sludge band. Hollows made homes in their sunken cheeks. There's a title for you. Heavy psych sounding records out of Rome. Formed in 2018, put a demo in 2018 called The Language of Longing. Another demo in 2019, a live album in 2020, and a split with the Slowmatics out of the UK. This is the band's first full length. And there's 2 tracks on this album, and it's 44 minutes of material. So 2 songs. They must definitely some long songs on that. That's out April 18th. Crypts of Despair from Lithuania. We had Dovidus on here. I just talked to Dovidus the other day, actually. He's a local guy for me over here in Lithuania. Death metal band. They have We Belong to the Grave coming out on Transcoding Obscurity Records out of India. Crypts of Despair formed in 2009. The band's third full length, followed to 2021's All Light Swallowed. This one has 9 tracks on it. And I believe Dovidus is probably going to come on one of the next 2 weeks and just pop on and talk about the new record. But that comes out on April 18th. Let me see here. I am kind of going in order, Ed. Voluptus out of Czechia. Black doom metal band Where Celestial Bodies Guide Not is the name of the record. Sun and Moon Records out of Romania. Formed in 2006, put out an EP in 2016 and a full length in 2020 titled Towards the Great White Nothing. 8 tracks, and that comes out April 16th. Serpent Mass out of Belgium. Black death metal band. Name of the record, it's actually a compilation, and it's going to be called Mass of the Serpent, Odious Gateways. It's a 12-inch vinyl. D. Pankraker Records out of Belgium. Band formed in 2016, put out demos 2017, 2019, 2021, and 23. This has 9 songs. It'll be out April 16th. Red Moon Architect from Finland, melodic death doom metal band. Name of the record is going to be October Decay, coming out on Noble Demon out of Germany. Red Moon Architect formed in 2011. Debut full length was 2012, titled Concealed Silence. This will be the band's 6th full length and a follow-up to 2020's record Emptiness Weighs the Most. Members past and present of God Flesh Deformed, Crimson Sun, Casket, Ghost Voyage, and Before the Dawn. That comes out April 17th, and I got a few more still here. Then we'll get to Ed and see what he's got. I already announced those ones. Let me see here. I think there are a couple more. Okay, Crow's Flight out of Finland. Heavy power metal band. The Dark Horizon is the name of this record. King's 2 Music Records out of Sweden as the label. Crow's Flight formed in 2008, put out 2 EPs, and this will be the band's third full length. That comes out April 18th. Ancestor of Chaos out of Cuba. Black metal band. Animal Ritual is the name of the record. Horror Pain Gore Productions out of Philly is the label. Formed in 2005, the band put out a demo in 2005 titled In Absence of Light. That was their first release. The debut full length was Hell Fucking Metal in 2008. And the new album, Animal Ritual, will be the band's fourth full length, and that comes out April 18th. 2 more to go. Gaffed out of Bricktown, New Jersey, which I'm very familiar with. I went to school there for a while. Brutal death metal band. Title is I Can Feel Myself Rot. Label is CDN Records out of Canada. Formed in 1994, the band put out a demo titled A Meal of Gore in 94. Another demo in 95 titled It Hurts to Be Dead. Put out a full length in 2023 titled Die Already. Members past and present of Ritual Torment, The Grieving Process, and Beyond the Faith. I Could Feel Myself Rot comes out April 20th on CDN Records. One more, Incinerate Him out of Los Angeles, death metal band. Name of the record is going to be Irrelevance of the Divine. Label Memento Mori from Spain. Band formed in 2008. Debut full length A Moment in the Vision came out in 2018. They also put out a full length in 2022 titled Disembodied. The new record is out April 21st. That's Incinerate Him from Los Angeles. And that's what I have, Ed. What do you got?
The only thing I saw was Madball, which I kind of dig Madball. They're old school. Didn't we play with them?
Yeah, we played with them with at the Florida Metal Fest with
That's right.
Not Diabolic, but Deicide,
Atheist.
Obituary,
Yeah.
Atheist.
Okay,
Trouble.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was right. But yeah, I don't know if it's a throwback, but it's called True to the Game, the Roadrunner Years. So maybe they're going back in time. I don't know. But I just saw it was out, and I like Madball, so I'll definitely check it out. And another band that I kind of dug in the early years, I kind of fell off them. Therion, Beyond the Darkest Veil of Time on Hammerheart. I used to really dig Therion. In the early days, they were real death metal-y, kind of like, what was the band we were talking about where their first records were like real death metal, and then they kind of went black metal. We were just talking about them. Same area, of Europe. But there was a band we were talking about. I can't think of their name right now, but they were really like a death metal band, and then they kind of went complete black metal. I see the freaking the logo. It's not Dark Funeral. It was.
You'll remember right when we get off today.
Of course I will. I see the logo. I can see the squiggly sticks for their logo. You know who I'm talking about because they were Dark Throne.
Oh yeah, well they've changed. Yeah,
yeah, Dark Throne. The first 2 records were death metal, is like heavy death metal. And then they kind of went black metal.
Yeah,
they started to turn. But that's what Therion or Therion or however you want to say it. That's what they reminded me of. Is the early days were death metal. I think they have a girl singing with them now.
I know Therion has a lot of. I mean, a lot of people I know really like that band.
Yeah. That's not the band Snowy Shaw was playing with, was it?
Yeah, he did do some stuff with Therion.
They have a girl singer, and I think he was singing.
Notre Dame, I know he did stuff with too. Yeah, we'll have to, God, that's another. That was the episode was probably a year and a half ago, I think.
Crazy how
time flies.
Time flies, man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, Ed, do you have any? I don't have anything else, man. I guess I know Sam's waiting to get on here. We can get Sam on.
Well, I'll mention the new Gruesome.
Oh yeah, I totally
they're
forgot
our buddies. But they're coming out with a new record on June 6th called Silent Echoes. It's their tribute to Human. That's what I've understood from Matt and Gus when they've talked about it. And when I talked to Gus, he said the next record they were doing in the catalog was based on Human.
And the artwork reflects that.
Yeah, for sure. And they put out a song yesterday called "A Darkened Window," and as soon as I heard it, I was like, it's amazing, Matt. I got to tell you, I don't know who's doing the writing, if it's Matt or Daniel, or even Gus, because Gus can write. Gus can write like a fucker on guitar. It was so. It sounded like if Death were writing today. That's what it reminded me of. I mean, that's what I heard, and it's insanity to me how something can sound so close to the original thing with just twisting up a bunch of riffs that were written. It's insane. I mean, but they're killing it. I got to be honest with you. There's a few, obviously Left to Die are playing actual Death tunes, from the first two records. So that's different. These guys are actually taking human riffs and flipping them around to sound like human. And to me, I don't know. My brain doesn't work like that. So I don't know if I could do that. I mean, I tried to think of a band a couple weeks ago. I was like, before this even came out, I knew it was coming out. I was like, man, is there a band out there that I could do something like that with, where I could take that's not around anymore, that I could literally write songs using their riffs, but flipping them so it has that similarity. And then I was like, I can't think of anybody I couldn't think of one band that I could do that with. Maybe Bolt Thrower, because they're the only band that's not around that has that heavy shit that you could literally just take that style and flip it around and it would still sound killer. But
well, they do it well. They definitely
they're one of my favorite bands, man. I got to be honest with you. It's weird because they're not technical. They're not, you know what I mean? They're just like Obituary, just a tuned down version of Obituary. And Carl Willits, he still kills it because when he was doing, what's the band he's in now? Oh shit, the other band, Hail of Bullets, was Van Drunen. What is the band? I can't think of the band he's doing now, but it's got old dudes from like Cerebral Fix, and it sounds like Bolt Thrower with a twist, because his vocals are never, he's always going to be that guy.
Yeah, you've always loved Bolt Thrower. I know.
Yeah, man, they're just really, really a great band. They just wrote good stuff. Like Carcass, it's one of those bands. The early days were a little hard because the production was terrible, but from Tools of the Trade on through Necrotism and then today, they know how to write music. I mean, they changed. Obviously, they were a straight up grindcore in the beginning, and now look at them. They're just writing.
Still rolling though.
I mean,
still rolling.
Shit. Just imagine. I remember Terry and them going, "Yeah, you want us to play 30 minutes? Sure, no problem. We'll come in and play 30 minutes for Amon Amarth."
Exactly.
That's not even sweating 30 minutes. You know what I mean? I mean, we're up there killing ourselves at 30 minutes because we don't do it. But for them, they're barely warmed up at 30 minutes.
Yeah, but Carcass, like you said, I mean, every time I've seen Carcass, it's been awesome. And
the Cruise, still say the Cruise is the best
they were fucking
they've
great.
sounded. And maybe because it was so intimate and where we were sitting, because, we were up in those little VIP area kind of thing. And
yeah, they were amazing.
Yeah, definitely crushing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess let's get Sam on, I guess, right? Which, we'll talk about, like I said, there'll be a lot of Tampa Bay talk in this, because it's the Tampa Bay, a lot of the stuff came out of Tampa. We've, with Denial Fiend, you also have Blaine Cook that comes into the picture, and Rob from DRI. So there's going to be a lot of, cool stories. We had Blaine on here, of course. Anybody who doesn't know, you can go back and listen to our old episodes, and we'll talk about that when we say goodbye at the end of the show, because there's a whole shitload of episodes. This is 86, so you can always go back on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out the old episodes. So let's get Sam Williams on. We're actually going to play another Denial Fiend song. So this one's going to actually have Blaine Cook on vocals, though, because Blaine replaced Cam eventually. We're going to play Corrupted Flesh off the Horror Holocaust record that also came out on Ibex Moon Records, which is obviously John from Incantation's label. This came out August of 2011. And we're going to play this song, and then we're going to get Sam Williams on here. We're going to talk all about some Tampa, some Denial Fiend, and some of the other stuff he's done, Down by Law, and his new band, Black Valley Moon. So we're back on the Tampa Morgue after this track. This is Corrupted Flesh from Denial Fiend off Horror Holocaust. And that was Denial Fiend with Corrupted Flesh off the Horror Holocaust record that came out on Ibex Moon Records in 2011. And we are joined by Sam Williams. How you doing, Sam?
Good, good, good. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you, man. I actually was talking to Dave Allison last night for a while, and you actually came up. He was talking about the Tampa Bay Metal Museum. I know you were there. You donated some stuff, but we talked about the museum on the show here. But how was your experience there?
Oh man, I was blown away by it. I know Dave. He's an awesome dude, and he's always super cool. But I had no idea that how good his organizational skills were. When he was talking about doing this, I was so into the idea because it is the home of death metal here, and it's weird how much or how lacking it is with that type of thing. Museums and or just it seems like there should be something to kind of commemorate that or document it. That scene, and so he told me about it, and I yeah he used I let him use a guitar that I had used with Denial Fiends that had been built for me by this company back then, 916 Guitars. They were like a small company. Anyway, So he put that up, and I was like honored, I was so stoked. And anyway, I went to go see it, and yeah, it just blew me away. It was so nice the way he did it, and it was big, and there's so many people there. Everyone was so down for it. That was really cool to see, and yeah, it was cool. I mean, actually after I saw it, I was like almost choked up. Like, wow, my thing was displayed here next to these guys, like Chuck Schuldiner's stuff or like Obituary. It was so cool, and he really did an amazing job. I told him he should try to make it permanent or something, and I know he's considering all kinds of options, but it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I know he's gonna do it again next year. He's got some other stuff in the work. But yeah, you came up last night. I told him you were coming on today. He had nothing but cool things to say about you. And I
Mm.
think for you, this is gonna be, you know, obviously we're gonna talk about the band you play with now and the band, and obviously we're gonna talk about Denial Fiend, which me and Ed have seen before a few times. We have the records and stuff. And for some of the listeners who actually follow your punk stuff, this actually may be kind of a little bit of stuff they probably didn't know, because you have a history going way back, and we're going to talk about all that, man. And first of all, you're born in Tampa.
Yep, Tampa native, totally.
Growing up as a kid, man, what's your like recollection? Like, how did you get introduced? Not even to metal, but what was your first memory of music as a kid growing up?
First memory of music is, let's see, when I was very, very young, I remember I was into, I mean, single digits. I was into Alice Cooper and Kiss, but probably just because of the visuals. I don't think I was even really listening to music at that point. I just visually, I thought they were really cool. In fact, I remember I had a T-shirt. I mean, I was so young, I can't even imagine. And I had the Gene Simmons solo album T-shirt, with his face. And man, I wore that thing till it was way too small, and like, but I was wearing it when I probably had never even heard the band before. I thought they were so amazing, and I remember going into the toy store and seeing the Kiss dolls, and of course, at that point, it was just all Paul Stanley because all the Aces and Jeans had been bought, but
Yeah.
but so and then so after that, my parents, they were always into music. They were always music fans, but they mostly listened to stuff from their era. They listened to, Johnny Cash, Elvis, Hank Sr., that kind of stuff. So music was always around, and they were always really supportive of me and me listening to music and stuff. And so anyway, when I got to school, and started listening to music, probably the very first stuff I was listening to was like the the radio, the metal stuff that was on the radio, Quiet Riot and Rush and stuff like that, and just like the shreddy metal guitar stuff, that was around then. And from then I got introduced to punk, which was, back then you almost had to be it was like a secret club. You didn't just hear that on the radio, you couldn't run across that on Spotify. It was just you really had to know somebody that was into that stuff, or to even know that it existed, so that took my whole musical thing into a whole new direction, once I discovered that stuff. That was the beginning of like real seriously being into music.
Do you remember the first
So,
record you ever owned?
mm, the first record that I owned, my mom gave me a like a stack of 45s that she had from over the years that she wasn't interested in. And I remember one that I really loved was a single from The Who, and it was like Happy Jack on one side and Whiskey Man on the other. So it was a really old one, and I remember I loved that record, and I would just play the hell out of it. The first record that I bought with my own money, I think, was Rock and Roll Over. The Kiss album. I'm pretty sure. I was super young at that point, but yeah, I think that's the first one I actually owned. Got it for Christmas or something, probably.
What were some of the record stores you were hitting as a kid? You used to go up to Ace Records and stuff? I know you're a Tampa guy.
At that point, before I was into underground music, it was just like Specs or whatever. I mean, just corporate record stores,
Camelot or
but yeah, exactly, Camelot um and then when I got into the punk and alternative and underground metal stuff, I was hitting up a place called Alternative Records a lot. And that was like the oasis, you know. And I hit Aces a couple times back when it was like it was at a flea market, you know. I remember going there a couple times and seeing Aces records there, and then I went to their other store in Tampa. And yeah, that was just kind of like the routine, you know, at some point, you know, growing up. It's like every Saturday actually Sunday was a good day for it. You'd hit all the record stores, you know, with your buddies and then go eat or something like that. But yeah, alternative, Aces, Vinyl Fever, that was another really big one, you know, for years. But yeah, those were like the really hip ones for sure.
What was the first show you ever attended?
First concert I ever went to, believe it or not, was Rat with Bon Jovi opening. And I was a huge Rat fan. I still love that band. I'll still defend that band. Bon Jovi, I had never heard of. He was just opening, and I didn't like him then. I never ever liked him. But yeah, Rat. My cousin took me. She knew I was into that stuff, and her and her husband were kind of rockers, you know, at the time. So they took me to that, and I loved it. You know, seeing Rat, and I think the second one I saw was Iron Maiden, and if I remember correctly, the opener. I forget who they had opening for them, maybe Halloween or something like that, but they canceled, and it ended up being Sabotage opening for them. And I had never heard of Sabotage, and I saw them, and I was blown away by them. And then I was even more blown away to find out that they were a local band, you know. So those are my first couple shows, and then after that, it was just punk all the way. Every show after that for like years and years and years was punk. But the first two, yeah, it was Rat and then Maiden.
What were some of the bands you were going to see back when you were a teenager over in Tampa, and some of the venues you're at hitting?
The venues, you know, I think my first punk show was at Janice Landing. You know, I was like the younger of the crowd that I was hanging around with. So I wasn't around in the early or mid '80s. My first show was probably '87 or something, and it was the Circle Jerks at Janice Landing. Um, and then there was just like a bunch of little weird venues that would kind of come and go. There was one called the Paint Factory that was only around for a very little while, but it was a really cool place. Brass Mug, man, the Brass Mug's been like an institution. I've seen punk and metal bands there through the years. It's just crazy. I saw Green Day at the Brass Mug. That's how crazy that is. You know, it was before they blew up. You know, that's crazy.
I think Nirvana played there too. I think Green Day and Nirvana played at the
Oh,
Mug back
Nirvana, I
in
could totally see.
way back.
Yeah, 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 totally. I never saw them, but yeah, Green Day. I was really into their first uh, couple records. I mean, they were just another melodic punk band, you know, playing little DIY venues. It's just amazing to see how huge that band got. I mean, they're like bigger than Pink Floyd now, you know, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, they played the Brass Mug.
I know you wrote to them too, which we'll get to,
Mhm.
when you were trying to find a job playing guitar. But, you're also into, obviously we're, at this show, we do a lot of the metal stuff, and you were big into the death metal scene also, like the Mantises and the Massacre at one time. Well, what do you remember about that scene growing up also in Tampa?
Well, the thing about the death metal thing, to me, it was always really related to punk. Because it's funny, you know, it is metal, but I remember when those bands would play for a lot of the, you know, quote unquote metalheads that listen to Judas Priest or Motley Crue or something, they would hear Massacre, and it would be way too much for them, you know. I would go to like because I would hang out with metalheads sometimes that liked, you know, Metallica and stuff like that, and I'd be like, dude, check this out, and it'd be like Morbid Angel or something, and they would just they couldn't, it did not compute, you know, the vocals were too heavy, it was too satanic or whatever. So a lot of the people that attended those shows were like people that were just into extreme music, which would include people that were into punk and hardcore. You know, that was a lot of the fan base for death metal when it first started, you know. And it just had kind of the same ethos a little bit, put on your own shows, throw up your own flyers, do everything yourself, it wasn't like, let's be Judas Priest. It was just like, let's put on these shows in living rooms and stuff. So I always saw like a big connection with those two scenes, and plus a lot of them were influenced by, most death metal bands will cite, DRI and stuff like that as a big influence, so I always saw the connection. It never seemed weird to me. And the funny thing is, when I at the peak of when I was into that stuff, I was really into I mean, just punk and metal, and that was it. I mean, death metal. I mean, I didn't even like thrash metal at that point. It was just it had to be death metal for me, and what really, I mean, the first wave of those earache bands, that was really my scene. I was so into that, and I remember like hearing that first Morbid Angel album, and as I said, I was a little bit younger, so I didn't see that band a lot. I didn't know about their demos and all that stuff. I just Altars of Madness, it came out, and I was just like floored, and it's still to me that's like the Rain and Blood of death metal, that's just like the game changer. But all those bands, Carcass, that and just that, Earache couldn't miss at that point, that label. And then Peaceville was putting out great stuff too. That first Autopsy record, I remember all that stuff. It was very exciting. Those bands were just so good.
You first picked up a guitar at 13?
Oh yes, that's right. Yep, yep. I was about 13. Um, it was the summer of some year. I can't remember whatever grade I was in. I started over the summer. I was like, I I was just trying to find out what my thing was as a kid. I just kept trying different stuff. I tried to skateboard for a while, but I just never got any good at it. And I didn't like sports. I never liked sports, so I was just kind of like, I was like, well, and I was just, yeah, somehow I stumbled, I always loved music, and I always just thought those guys were the coolest. Eddie Van Halen is still like my biggest idol, just the coolest human to ever walk the earth. So I just was like, that's what I want to do, so that was my big idol growing up. And yeah, I got the guitar, and I think my friend and I started a punk band like weeks later. That was what was cool about punk is you didn't really have to know how to play at the time. You could just start your band immediately.
And that was the band Insight? That was your first actual band?
Yeah, man, yeah, golly, you must have. I don't know how you found that, but yeah, that was the first thing I was in. It was just at that point, I think I was really hardcore into the straight edge thing, so I'm pretty sure it was a straight edge band. Can't remember. I remember we started doing covers of like 7 Seconds and Dag Nasty and try to do our best at that kind of thing. And then we had a couple of our own songs, and yeah, that was the very first thing. That was just a couple friends in a garage kind of thing. I think we ended up playing somebody's house party once. That was like our big thing. That was pretty much it. But yeah, that was the first one.
And you guys, what? You guys only did 2 shows? Was that your f so do you actually go on a real stage with that band?
I never did. No, like I said, I think we did. I know we did a friend's party at his house. And I feel like there was one other show, but I can't remember. But no, I didn't hit a stage until the band after that. Yeah, so we never got really out of the garage too much with that one.
And I wanted to ask you, I heard there was a band that influenced you a lot, a band called Old. Was that the band from New Jersey?
Mm, I did love that band. Yeah, OLD. Yeah, man, I love that band. They were so weird, and like
Yeah.
they were just bizarre as hell, and they just had like a, you know, I mean, for one thing, though that grindcore stuff, it wasn't like there was a million grindcore bands back then. There was just, a handful of grind. It was so early on that scene, but they just had such a weird sound. And I remember, years later when met John McEntee from Incantation, and we would have these conversations because we were hanging out a bit, when I was doing Denial Fiend and we were on his label. And he knew those guys really well. He grew up with them, and yeah, I was just picking his brain about them because yeah, that they were just always such a mystery. And then they ended up going kind of industrial grind kind of thing, you know. But yeah, that band was so cool. That first album was just crazy.
You talk about John, he played with Henry in, Revenant. So you had Henry from Revenant, yeah, there was a guy, James, who played in a band called from New Jersey called Regurgitation, which was,
Mhm.
me and Ed are both from New Jersey, so yeah, I remember their first full length too, which was, God, it was '80s, it was probably like '88, '89. Um,
Yeah.
but that kinda
Yeah.
changed, did that kinda go to your next band? Because I know you guys did a band called Balance next in what, '93?
Yeah, you know what's funny though, now that you bring up OLD, because first they were there. There's funny they changed their name if I remember. On the first album, I believe they were Old Lady Drivers, and so it was OLD. And then later on, they just switched it to Old. But the first record actually influenced me because I remember we were listening to it so much that Insight, you know, I was myself and the drummer really were like the best buds, and you know at some point the singer would leave. We had a different singer, we have a different bass player, we just were doing different things, and me and him were jamming. But I remember one of the weird variations of Insight. We had a singer and we were trying to come up with something completely new, and we were into like the ska punk thing that was just really just the one band, Operation Ivy. You know, we love that band, so we were going to try to do a band that was grind ska. And it was like grindcore meets ska. So we would have these ska kind of reggae verses, and then it would bust out in these grindcore choruses. And we were really trying to replicate like the weirdness of OLD with that. And I remember even we had the lyrics that were kind of influenced by OLD, which is just bizarre because their lyrics are so weird. You know, I remember they had a song about what, like something about a supermarket, like a little kid running into an old person in a supermarket and being freaked out or something. And yeah, so we were trying to make like a Operation Ivy meets OLD kind of sound, which is just so weird. I don't know what I was thinking, but but yeah, so I was really into OLD, and I feel like they always get left out of the conversation because like um you know, I feel like Earache has reissued a lot of that stuff, you know, those early records, Carcass and Morbid Angel, but OLD is just kind of like you can't find that thing anywhere. It's like on YouTube, I think somebody put it up, but it's not even on Spotify or streaming or anything. And I'm like, man, they need to get their due. I mean, they were really one of the early grindcore bands if you think about it, you know, they were, you know, so yeah, but yeah, so that's my OLD trip.
They
But
did
yeah,
a
so after
split with
that I was in.
Suck too.
Yeah, exactly, and I was so impressed by that. And Suck's another band that was really early on, an early grindcore band. And I remember when they started, they were kind of jokey. You know, Tampa's just so weird. We glommed onto the weirdest things, and I remember people around here. We were really into Napalm Death when that first album came out, and Suck, those guys were all fans of that, and it was just kind of like we didn't even know what grindcore was. We were just like, I guess it's just noise. You just get up there and hit everything as hard, So that was their philosophy, and their when they first started, it was just kind of like make up the lyrics on the spot, kind of make a bunch of noise, and they evolved into like a serious band, and they're really influential now. I'm so surprised when I play these festivals in Europe and stuff, people just with the ass suck stuff, it's like a huge band for them. But they did end up being a really great band, and again, one of the early grindcore bands. They totally have their spots in the pantheon of Tampa extreme music history for sure. And yeah, and they put out that split, and that was just so awesome to me. I was really impressed by that. I remember that well. Like wow, you guys are doing a split with those guys, awesome.
Yeah, '93, that's when you guys put together what, Balance, and that's with, former guys from Slapper Reality, and this is the first kind of not pro band, but this is the first band you're in that's like I think you record demos, that's your first time in the studio with a band also, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, you got all that correct. It's they were a couple years older than me, and they were the guy. They were, Slap Reality. They were doing it. To me, in Tampa at that point was so kind of uh, backwater, kind of unpopulated. It was a very small town, very small city, and nobody around here was really. When you would see a band touring from California and putting out records, that was just kind of nearly unfathomable around here, for a punk band. It was such a small pool of people to begin with, and then ones that were organized enough to get signed or good enough or organized enough to, do a proper demo and all that kind of stuff. It was very, very few. And Slap Reality were one of the ones that were doing that. They had a record out. They had several releases out actually, and they were touring and playing with bands like Seven Seconds and Descendants and all these bands that were just like my idols. So they eventually split up, and I was friends with those guys, really good friends. That was like my little gang of buddies was like those guys and some other people, and um, they Joe and Frank, they were kind of part of the core team of Slap Reality. They were forming a new band, and they asked me to play, and I got in, and I was just so stoked, because these were like the cool older kids, and and they really knew what they were doing. So to me, I was always kind of ambitious, and that I was like, I always wanted that next step. I knew I wanted to be a musician from a pretty young age, and I was like, well, these guys definitely have their stuff together. And yeah, that was the first time I played on an actual stage. I wasn't with them for very long, but in the small time I was with them, we did a lot. We recorded a demo in a real studio. We played a couple, fairly big shows. One of them was opening for Down by Law. Ironically, that's when I first met Dave and Down by Law at Club Detroit, and we played. It might have been the very last Slam Fest. The local hardcore punk festival that they used to do here annually. We played, and that was at the Ritz Theater. Um, but yeah, I think that might be the only two times I played with the band. But yeah, that was the next thing, and I learned a lot from them. Frank is kind of like the leader of that band, and he's always pretty organized and driven, and I was always impressed by that, and I still talk to those guys all the time, so it's good experience.
What studio did you guys go to do the demo? Was it over in Tampa?
It was actually in St. Pete. It was called Panda Studios, I think was the name of it. It was George Harris was the guy. He was the engineer, and he's still around. I talk to him on Facebook once in a while. I haven't seen him in many, many years, but he was a really cool, mellow guy. And they ended up working with him a lot after me. They did a lot of other stuff with him, records and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it was called Panda. If that was the name of it, it was his place. And I think it was St. Pete is where it was.
So you leave the band around this time, like you're what working at a steel mill and you're writing bands, basically seeing if they want looking for a guitar player.
Yeah, I left Balance. It was yeah, and um, I would get bored of things really easily back then. As a kid. Stuff couldn't really hold my attention, and it was just I just ended up getting kind of bored with that very, kind of quickly, and then I was working at temp agencies, and that's how I was kind of doing my thing. And I mean, I was right out of high school. I mean, just barely. I was still 17 at this point, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, because I had long hair, I would just get sent straight to the ditch digging, physical labor jobs, and it was just brutal in the heat. So they sent me. I could never get like an office job or anything like that, and I wasn't really gunning for that anyway. But I just remember I was at a steel mill is where I worked for a fair, several months, and I was just sweeping up, covered in like steel dust and just in hell, And I was thinking, man, I gotta get a band that's professional, that's making its living doing this, and I just couldn't find that around here really, so I just started writing letters to bands. Yeah, I wrote to several. The only ones I really remember though, were I wrote to Green Day and said, "Do you guys need a guitar player?" and Down by Law and the Chemical People, which is weird to me. I don't know why I did that because the Chemical People. Well, one thing my logic was if it's a three-piece band, they can use another guitar player. So that's how Green Day got on the list, and Green Day also, I had their first 7-inch, and it was just a little Xerox handwritten thing, and it said right on there on it, we'll play anywhere, just give us gas money. So I was like, well, these guys are desperate, so maybe they can use another guitar player, and I really liked them, um, so um, Chemical People is another three-piece band that I was really into, although they weren't really that successful, I don't think, but I liked them a lot. But the weird thing is, Down by Law in its first lineup was basically Dave Smalley singing for the Chemical People. So I don't know why I kind of auditioned for both, but or put my letter in for both. But anyway, that's how it happens. Yeah, I was just writing letters and that kind of thing.
And you got picked up, so you wind up with Down by Law, and so you flew out to Los Angeles at 17? You were actually staying at their ex-drummer's house?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was like 17. As I said, my parents were so supportive. They were always great. And they paid for my flight out there. And my buddy went with me, just my friend, for like moral support. And we're just like, oh, this is cool. We'll hang out there. And yeah, it was Dave Nasworthy. He was the ex drummer. He's the drummer for Chemical People. And he lived right in the heart of Beverly Hills. And great guy. He was super cool. He was like um I always think of how generous it was of him, because I'm a complete stranger, and he let me just stay at his house to try out for this band. I stayed there for like the weekend or whatever, and and I tried out for him, and I was, it's weird because around here, in the punk scene, in that very small little scene, I was kind of hyped up by people and myself as being like a really good guitar player, like I was a step cut above, I guess a lot of my friends. But when I got out there and started playing kind of with you know actual pros and stuff, I realized I was not very good. So I thought I kind of sucked at the audition, and I think it was probably mainly my personality that got me in, I got along with everybody great. Dave is like my favorite singer of all time, and he was also in like my favorite band, which was Dag Nasty. I mean, that was like the end all be all band for me. And so we got along great. I got along with everybody, and well, I got along with two of the three guys. The bass player at the time, he was hesitant. He was like, I don't know if this guy can cut the mustard, but he got outvoted. Lucky for me, so. So yeah, I ended up getting the
Yeah.
gig, and it's funny. My mom, as supportive as she was also protective. I was the only child, so when I called her back and I was like, I got it, I got the gig. She was simultaneously happy but also bummed. I think she thought I was just gonna come out here and kind of get it out of my system and then get rejected and come back. But then when I got it, she was like, "Oh boy, he's this my 17-year-old son is going to be, traversing all over the planet with these people I don't know and all this stuff." So, but that's
And
how it ended up.
actually, the first record you did with them was the Punk Rock Academy fight song, which was, I think, one of their biggest records ever, and you recorded that at A&M Studios, which I heard some stories like, first of all, A&M Studios is where they did the "We Are the World" video, which, all of us old people remember with, Billy Joel, Michael Jackson, all those guys.
Yeah.
Um, and you guys were also recording when you guys do that album, the Punk Rock Academy album, you're recording the album the same time as the Stones are doing, Voodoo Lounge in '94?
Yes. It was crazy. Yeah, dude, it was just such a whirlwind. I mean, that's like I just can't even. It's like I think back about that time, and it was just so crazy. I mean, it was just one thing after another. How great that was. I mean, first off, I just get they whip me out there and they're like, we're gonna do a record, and I can't remember if I toured, if I did a small tour before the record. I feel like maybe I did. I think maybe the tour happened before the record, and it was opening for All, which is the Descendants, basically. So already that was like getting to meet my heroes and tour with them, just like, wow, this is nuts, you know. And so then we go back and we record. We're recording in LA, so I'm hanging out in LA a lot, just kind of. Uh, I never lived there, but I would spend weeks and weeks at a time out there, and yeah, somehow we ended up recording at A&M Studios. We just weaseled our way in there, and we were so it had three studios. Had room A, which was the big We Are the World room. B was just kind of like a mid-sized little live room, and then C was just where they would do mixing. It was very small, and so we were in B, and they were doing Voodoo Lounge in A, but it was just Keith. He was the only guy there, just doing his overdubs at that point, and um, yeah, that's the best story of all time. Is that the lounge at A&M Studios was nicer than my house. It was such a nice place. And so a lot of times I would just be like, I'll just stay here at night, I'll just sleep in the lounge and then we'll get up in the morning and I'll go walk down Hollywood Boulevard and get my breakfast. It was just so awesome. It was so cool. And then but Keith would only come in the middle of the night. He would start working at midnight and he was never there during the day. So we were just like we wanted to see him, just to see Keith Richards. But it was like I don't know if it was that was just his hours, if he just didn't want anybody around, but he would just work in the middle of the night. So I fell asleep at the middle of the night in this lounge. This lounge was directly across Studio A, and I could hear him in there doing his overdubs. He was doing the lead to the single of that song, and I was like, "Oh, this is crazy." So I know he's in there, and I wake up in the middle of the night and, I'm bleary eyed and it's blurry. And I hear giggling, I hear girls giggling. And uh, I kind of look out, into the hallway and I just see all these girls running around in bikinis. They're young, they're probably in their 20s. And I thought I was dreaming or something, so I just went back to sleep. And I wake up in the morning and then everybody runs over to me and they're just like, last night was the producer's birthday. So him and Keith just were in there partying all day or all night with these girls. That's all they did. So now we know and they're like and he's passed out in there. So he passed out. So now they're all passed out and it's like 1 in the afternoon and I'm like, now we know he's in there. So now we're just waiting for him to come out. And he did. He eventually came out, and exactly like I mean, he's Keith Richards all the time, I guess, because it's exactly like you'd think. He has the robes, he's got the hair, he's got the bandana, he's got a 20-year-old girl under each arm, kind of walking him out to the door, like, see you guys later. And we all ran over and got our autographs, and he was really nice. He was super cool. It was a great experience, to finally meet him. And at that point, it's not like I was a big giant Rolling Stones fan. I was Mr. Punk Rock all the way, but even then, I was at least smart enough to know that this is not something I should just pass up. So I did get my autograph. It's still hanging in my room, and now the Rolling Stones are like one of my favorite bands. So I'm so glad I did that.
And they're still going. I mean, what's he
That's
Jagger's like
crazy. I know.
81 now or something like that. I think he just got
Unbelievable.
engaged to like a 37-year-old this week or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
God, that's just amazing. And I remember at that point thinking, boy, this guy is old. And he was probably, I'm sure he's younger than I am now. This is like the 90s, so he's probably,
yeah.
but yeah, but now to think that they're in their 80s, that's just insane.
Yeah, that's and you did what? You did 9 albums so far with Down by Law. And obviously you and Dave are how is Dave now? I know there was some health issues going on. And he's been running that band for what, 36 years now?
He's the original guy. So they put out two records before I joined. And yeah, it was always him singing. So even I'm not technically an original member, even though I did join on the third record, and that did end up being the big success. It was just like we put that one out, and it ended up being like the big one for us, you know. So that felt good, and but yeah, I guess however long it's been. I mean, the band started, golly, I think 89 or 90 or something like that. I don't even know, but yeah, he's been there the whole time, so it's for sure. Probably 36 years. That sounds about right.
And how's his health? Because I know he had some issues, obviously, that he announced. I think last year.
Yeah, it's good. It was a really serious cancer diagnosis, which is really going around. I mean, it's like uh, um, Lou from Sick of It All is dealing with it. I know Mike Ness had to go through treatments. I guess we're just getting to that age now. Those guys are all about 10 or 15 years older than me. So, but yeah, so he had that, and it was very serious for about a year. And we were in the middle of recording a record, and it was a very difficult record to record just because of that, the health stuff and the scheduling, and it took a really, really long time, but we finally got it out, and right about the time it came out, he's officially cancer free, but and we've done a show since then, and he did great. He didn't miss a beat. It was like we did a festival in Orlando with a bunch of other bands, Black Flag, the Dwarves, Dead Kennedys, all that stuff, and he killed it. He did so good. It was about 110 degrees out, and I was seeing spots at that point. It was outside, and I look over just to see if he needed a break, and he was doing fine. So he was in excellent health. Now, um, it does have lingering effects. He still has to, I guess he's some sort of treatments, and it does affect you. In other words, we we did we're probably not going to do any really long touring anymore. We got to keep everything kind of compact, because of it, and because he still has to go to the doctor a lot and just keep an eye on everything. And we had to recently cancel another fest appearance, not due to that specifically. It was like a bad case of laryngitis or something, but it could be an immune system thing. But so the overall he's doing great, but